Yes.
Good morning, peoples. It's Andrew, and I'm back with Sharon from Grief Reiki. Hey, Sharon.
Good morning.
And it's beautifully cool down where you are, isn't it?
No, no, it's not. My parents' house is from 1952 and it's doesn't have air. So I'm like, anyway, sorry. That's my problem.
But it's what we were saying last Friday. It was 117 degrees here in the valley. And it's just getting crazy, isn't it? It's hotter all the
It's scary because it's never been this hot, I don't think, before. It gets hot, but 117, I mean, that's Palm Springs weather, right?
right. Yeah. So yes, if you don't have air conditioning, it's kind of crazy, isn't it?
Yeah.
But so we're here to talk this week. We're gonna talk about something we haven't really addressed today, and that's addiction. The track of the week that was recommended to me was a Demi Lovato track, and we're both fans of Demi anyway. But she had got herself sober, and that was to be much admired and celebrated. And about a week or so ago, she came out with a track called Sober, where she was, it's a beautiful track. It's super well executed, where she basically breaks the news that she's not and that she's fallen off the wagon. And in the grief world, well, there's so many aspects of this, isn't there? There's the grief of being associated with your own addiction or dealing with that. And sometimes what you see is even more important, the grief of the family that have to work with the person who's dealing with addiction. So many facets of this. What's been your exposure to that, Sharon, from the grief and the addiction?
Well, I think the experience I have is that when people don't, and I'm first of all, I'm not a licensed therapist. I'm only a grief educator, and so I'm coming from that perspective. But with grief, if you haven't dealt with your grief, grief is cumulative, and so it just builds and builds and builds and builds. And if you've had a lot of loss in your life and you haven't dealt with those emotions, eventually they can overwhelm you. And so it's very normal for people to turn to something else, whether it's, something that's not healthy for them. Well, all of it's not healthy. Whether it's alcohol or drugs, or some people go shopping. Some people like me, worked like 70, 80 hours a week. Those are all addictive behaviors because we feel like, it takes those emotions away temporarily, but really what happens is it just buries them. And so it's very, very, very common for grievers to find an escape from their emotions. And oftentimes, if it's a behavior that continues, it can lead to addiction. So it's a very common phenomenon with grievers.
There's so many things. On the addiction side, the underlying reasons why people adopt those behaviors. And that unresolved grief aspect is prevalent in so many of them, isn't it?
Absolutely. I don't want to say that, that's the only reason, because I'm sure there's lots of reasons. But I think because we don't deal well with loss as a society, we tend to just kind of gloss over something that happens. And then again, like you said, those emotions that go with it, we tend to bury it because we live in a society, especially for people like Demi Lovato, where you kind of have to be on all the time. You have to always be in this best place, right? And so it becomes that mask that we all wear, and I know I've done it. People ask you, how are you doing? And you're like, well, I'm fine. In reality, your insides are like, I'm not fine. I'm really suffering here. But I would imagine that being in that position, she's always on, meaning she always has to be fine for her fans and for the press. And so you kind of live these two worlds, right? Where you're okay, quote unquote, in some sense with the front that you put to the rest of the world. And then inside, when you're alone, you feel like you're, like you're losing it. So I think that's very, very common.
It's super interesting. I used to be a professional songwriter. So that, songs are stories, and songs don't have to be real life. And, But you look at the track like this, and it's nice to think that it is absolutely honest and it is absolutely true and reflecting what she's going through. And as she says, this only happens when she's lonely. And you think of the superstar life, and you are this person, and you have these millions of fans, and yet when you step off the stage, there's nobody else that quite has that, and that is massively lonely. And if you don't have that support group, it's so easy just to fall, isn't it?
Yeah, I think even for us regular people, it's the same thing, right? I mean, how many people can you tell your deepest, most, emotional thoughts to? And, we think maybe there are a group of people around us that we can tell, but in reality, I mean, I'm just speaking for myself, there's probably only a small percentage of those people that you really tell your deepest, darkest thoughts to. And so you hold it inside. And I think being able to trust, and I'm sure in her position, especially, who do you tell these things to? Do you tell them at all, or do you have, managers and folks around you that are just really yes men, like, okay, you'll get over it here, and maybe here's a drink, or here's some drugs, or here's whatever, you need to be in your best game. And you really don't have that ability to have a confidence with somebody about what's going on inside of you and have them actually listen to you without judging, analyzing, or criticizing you.
But it looks like what she did was she flipped that entire switch and decided she would tell the whole bloody world. Because, I mean, coming out with a track saying, I'm sorry, I'm not sober, and I recognize my friends have let you down. I've recognized, I'm trying to be a role model, but I'm only human. I mean, it was an astonishingly open and honest track. And the result was actually she deepened her relationship with her fans and her audience. There's amazing footage of her, singing this. It's a brand new track. And the audience already knows the words, and they're loving her and supporting her and telling them they're proud of her. And, there is that weird flip side, which is just astonishing to see.
I think you're absolutely right. And I've always loved Demi Lovato. I remember when her dog died and she posted this emotional, Instagram post about her dog and how much she loved her dog. And it was just, I mean, I was literally in tears reading it. And I thought, how open and honest. And I think she's a smart woman. And I think, from her perspective, she's been struggling with her sobriety for a long time, eating disorders, other things. And I think her honesty about it is really what's needed right now. And it's such a role model for young people, because when they see somebody, in the public eye like that, who is struggling, and realize, hey, she's not perfect. She's not up on a pedestal. She's not superhuman. She's really human. I think that just endears you to her even more, the fact that she can talk about it. And I think that's huge. And I think people in the public eye who do that, it really helps us, as I say, regular people, to realize, we're not alone, right? That we are part of a group that feels things, and everybody goes through that. It doesn't matter. We're not alone. And I think that's so important, when you're going through these things, because you do feel alone, and knowing you're not is just pushes you in the direction of healing for sure.
But it's knowing who to trust, because, you and I, if we are not alone, if we're alone or we're in that difficult space, then you can reach out, you can go online, you can find a grief support group, you can find, a bunch of people that, you can make anonymous contact with, random contact with, and develop that. But if you're Demi Lovato, you can't, I mean, the minute you reach out, everything changes, doesn't it? I mean,
it's got to be really difficult for her to have, like you said, those trusted people around her to give her help, and knowing that they're doing it in her best interest, right? And not necessarily, well, we need to get her back up on stage because we've got money to be made. So I mean, my heart goes out to her. How do you find that balance? I know she's done sober living for quite a while. And so she must have found her tribe that helps her get through this. So hats off to her.
But that's the thing with addiction. It's we helped a friend of ours through an intervention. And they did brilliantly. I mean, they're now, God, that's over a decade ago, and sober and happy, and life worked out fantastically. But it's that you have a tribe, and they go to meetings, and it always struck me, particularly in LA, that there weren't more gossipy stuff, because I mean, actors and actresses and musicians are right at the risk edge for addiction. They're just from the lifestyles that they lead. And so that there are celebrity AA groups, and there are certain meetings that you can attend. And like AA, you can go and attend any meeting. But there are certain meetings that are the celebrity ones, but you never hear gossip out of it, do you? You generally don't hear of people coming out of an AA meeting where there was a celebrity and spilling the beans with a journalist or TMZ. That I always thought was amazingly cool.
Yeah, I think, I think there's a bond to know that when people are struggling, that, and trying to get help, that you respect their privacy. They may go in there and have them all sign non-disclosure agreements. I don't know. My friend actually runs a support group for people in reality television. And she said in the beginning, it was very difficult because people didn't want to be judged or criticized or analyzed because they were coming to this support group. But I think once they all got there, she said it was just an amazing bond that, it's such a difficult environment to work in, that everybody was so supportive of each other, that they didn't need to talk about it outside of that group because they knew they had a safe place where they could go and they didn't want to ruin that. So, I think there is that bond that happens when we are struggling with other people, that human bond that keeps us, ethically in the right place so that we don't divulge other people's issues. And I think that is so important. I think you're right, especially here in LA where everybody wants to talk about everything.
Right. But I mean, the two big themes that come out of today for me, it's honesty, it's that, and it's the trusting that if you're honest, you're not going to get burned by it. I mean, that's the huge thing, isn't it? Because until you're honest, you can cheat yourself, you can lie to yourself, you can lie to everybody else, but you're not going to deal with the underlying things, whether that's unresolved grief or whatever it is that's led to that kind of behavior. So it's being honest enough and trusting enough that you can do that, and then two, having a group or other human beings that you trust enough to be honest with, whether that's one-on-one counseling or one-on-one with not one-on-one counseling, but within a group of other people. And it's believing that exists and that you can actually get that's half the battle.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I just watched a show with Jada Pinkett Smith has a I don't know, whatever, a kind of a Facebook TV show that she has. And there was an episode on addiction that just recently aired. I watched it over the weekend, which is ironic that we're talking about this topic. And her mom was on the show. Her mom was a heroin addict for many, 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 many years. And she had her sister-in-law, Will's sister, and another friend on who were all addicts. And listening to them, it really boiled down to what you said, the first point, and that's being honest with yourself and self-love, not feeling like you deserve to get better or deserve, it's so important to love yourself and realize I am worth getting better. I am worth doing this work. And that was a theme that they kept bringing up, the honest part about it, admitting you have a problem, and then just, no one will love you except yourself, and you have to take care of yourself. Self-love was so important. That was such a big topic with them. So I thought that was really powerful.
Is that something that Reiki can help with?
I think Reiki can definitely help with that, because doing anything, right? Anything when you're having a tough time is self-love. If you walk, if you, doing Reiki on yourself, bringing yourself to a place of peace. And I think that's what Reiki did, at least for me, is it brought me to a place of peace and it quieted my mind. And when my mind's quiet, I can actually feel things more. Reiki can open up your feelings for those emotions that you've been burying. for so long. And it can also just quiet your mind for a while, so you can just feel like you're not going 1,000 miles an hour. It makes you feel relaxed. So, maybe it's a spiritual drug. I don't know. It's not, at least it's not alcohol or whatever. But in some ways, the whole point of addiction is because you want to feel better. You think, right? And you think the drugs and that are doing that. But with Reiki, it's a more safe way of going about feeling better. And I think anything like that is very helpful. Definitely. It helped me for sure.
It's I was quoting it in the write-up for the track. You're right. I mean, why do drugs? Why do booze? Why do whatever? And it's so that you're no longer, feeling how you were feeling, because, you don't have to, it's a suppressant. Yes, there's the upside and it feels great. I mean, that was, one of my favorite books, Irvin Welsh's Trainspotting, which they made into that great movie. It has the great line that says, we wouldn't bloody do it if it didn't feel good. There's that huge element. But it is more of a case of I don't want to feel that way. And I like the idea of getting addicted to Reiki, because it doesn't look like there's too much downside to that.
Right. And I think anything, whether it's Reiki, yoga, Tai Chi, like I said, walking, painting, writing, you can get addicted to things that are healthy for you, I guess, in some ways. But you're right, it's an escape. And at first it feels good, but over time, it doesn't feel good anymore. And I think with Reiki and all of these other modalities, over time, it still feels good, which is a good thing.
Right. Well, check out the song if you're dealing with this, or anybody is dealing with addiction. There are so many places online you can go, and literally the best answer right now is just Google, what you're dealing with. If you're interested in how Reiki can, benefit you, get in touch with Sharon, because that's what she does. On your show this week, who have you got this Tuesday?
I have a woman who's also a grief recovery specialist. She just lost her dad, so we're going to talk a little bit about that. Her name is Ellen Monsees, and she's also just written a book about how to find joy in your life after loss. And so I think that'll be really important, because we don't think we can ever find joy when we've gone through a difficult loss. And so she's experienced that and has written a book about it. We're going to talk about that tomorrow.
Superb. I'd like to learn more about that, because yes, it's in my family there are people still struggling, and it would be super insightful. All right, and what time is that tomorrow?
It's at noon Pacific, 3 p.m. Eastern.
Awesome. Well, you can tune in on Sharon's Facebook page. There'll be the link below. As ever, Sharon, I love doing these. It's great to chat with you. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
And we'll see you next week. All right. Take care, people. Bye.